This is section 12.6, volume of cylinders. So just to review, a cylinder has two circular bases. That's the difference between a cylinder and a cone. A cone would have one circular base. A cylinder is not a polyhedron because it's not made up of polygons. It has curved surfaces, so it's made up of circles, and circles are not polygons. So, the volume V of a cylinder with a radius R and an area of a base B can be written like this. Volume equals capital B, area of the base, times the height. Well, that's the exact same formula we had for volume of a prism. We had volume of a prism was area of the base times the height. But the difference here is that the base of the cylinder is never going to change. It's always going to be a circle. When we had volumes of prisms, we had triangular prisms, which had triangle bases, or we had rectangular prisms, which meant it had a rectangular base. So our area formula for the base would change. Well, in a cylinder, since the base is always a circle, the area formula for the area of the base will always be pi r squared. So we can write our volume formula as pi r squared times h, because this pi r squared does represent our capital B, our area of a base. So let's try some problems. 1a, find the volume of each cylinder round to the nearest tenth. So I'll start by writing the volume formula for the cylinder. Pi r squared times h. And now I'm going to fill in the pieces. Well, I see that r, the radius, is 6.1. And h, the height, the thing connecting the two bases, is 12. So I'll plug that into my formula. Pi times 6.1 squared times the height of 12. So remember, be careful on your calculator. You're going to start with exponents first because of PEMDAS. 6.1 squared times 12 times pi equals 1,402.8 feet cubed, because we're talking about volume. So again, the buttons on your calculator, you would want to do 6.1, hit the squared button, times pi times 12 equals. Okay? So always deal with order of operations, PEMDAS, I have to deal with those exponents first. So let's look at 1b. I still see a cylinder, so I'm going to write down my volume formula for the cylinder, pi r squared times h. Now looking at the pieces, I see the height, the thing connecting my two circular bases, is 5, but I see that they give me the diameter, the distance all the way across, is 11.4. Well, I don't need the diameter in my formula, I need the radius. So I know that my radius is the diameter divided by 2, which gives me 5.7. Now I'm ready to plug into my volume formula. Pi times my radius squared times my height. So again, we would start out order of operations, 5.7 squared times pi times 5 gives me a total volume of 510.4 meters cubed. Be careful, make sure you pay attention to your labeling. Number 2, find the height of a cylinder with a diameter of 10 and a volume of 549.5 cubic yards, round to the nearest tenth. So I'm going to start by noticing that they give me the volume, and we're talking about a cylinder. So I'll write down the volume formula for the cylinder, pi r squared times h. Now let's look at the information they give me. They tell me first that the diameter is 10. I notice that the diameter is not in my volume formula. So I'm going to use the diameter to solve for my radius. The radius is the diameter divided by 2, which means my radius is 5. Then I notice that they give me a volume of 549.5 cubic yards. I'm going to use those two and plug into my formula. 549.5 goes where I see V. Pi, my radius was 5, and they want me to solve for my height. So again, let's start out by doing our exponents first. 5 squared is 25. Pi, although it looks like a variable, it's a number. So at this point, I'm going to type into my calculator 25 times pi. Remember, make sure you use the pi button on your calculator. Don't type in 3.14 because that will round my answer. Now I have one variable. I'm going to get rid of the 78.54 by doing the opposite. I'm going to divide both sides by 78.54. That way my h is by itself. So I'm going to type in 549.5 divided by 78.54. And at this point, they want me to round to the nearest tenth. So I see that is 7.0. Looking at my units, I see my units for everything is yards. So my height would be 7.0 yards. Let's try one more. Find the volume of the plastic building brick shown. Round to the nearest tenth. Well, looking at this, it's kind of a combination of figures. I see a rectangular prism on the bottom. And I see 2 cylinders on the top. So I am going to have to make my own formula. I'm going to start with the rectangular prism first. The volume for a rectangular prism is the area of the base times the height. Okay, we know the area of the base of a rectangle is the length times the width. So I'm going to go with 4 times 5. That gives me my capital B. The height is what connects the 2 bases, which would be 12. Now let's look at the cylinders. Well, I know I have 2 of them, and the volume formula for a prism is pi r squared times h. So looking at the picture, I see it gives me a diameter of 3. Well, if my diameter is 3, my radius would be half of that, or the diameter divided by 2, which would be 1.5. My height looks to be 1. So now I'm just going to go through and simplify. So start out by doing 4 times 5, which gives me 20, times 12, for a total area for my rectangular prism, volume, of 240. Now let's go to our calculator again. Start with your exponents. 1.5 squared times pi times 1, which gives me 7.07. I'm going to add them together to find a total volume of 247.1 inches cubed. So again, this would be a composite figure, so I would have to make sure that I make my own formula. I don't have an area formula for something like a Lego brick, which looks to be what this is. And I'd have to plug it in and go piece by piece. I did miss something. Maybe you caught what I missed. There are 2 of these cylinders. I did not multiply this by 2. Let's fix that really quickly. So 2 times 7.07, since there's 2 cylinders, always go back and check your work, gives me an area formula to the nearest tenth of 254.1. Got to include both of those cylinders on the building brick or the Lego. Okay, so at this point you will go to your 12.6 assignment and work on those. Make sure you are being careful to label all of these. Again, we're talking about volume in most of these, so I'm going to have units cubed. Okay, a few of them you will be talking about either the height or the radius. Make sure you label those appropriately